Magic the Gathering is the uncontested king of all card games. But back when it started, there was the potential that it could have been completely obliterated and left on the pile of cardboard corpses due to creeps. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about how Magic was saved from the creeps, the power creeps. If you don't know what I mean by that, well, there have been a lot of card games that have come throughout the years. I've experienced a ton of these. I remember when Magic first started out, there was millions, it felt like millions, of all these different card games just flying by a mile a minute, just kind of soaring up into the sky and crashing down into the ground as power creeps held onto their bodies and dragged them downwards. I mean, power creeps aren't actually living creeps that come out and grab card games out of the sky, but I like the way it sounds, so shut up. So, power creep is when a game basically gets to the point where if you don't buy the newest sets, you won't be able to play this game. What happened with games like Spellfire, that's a crazy example to me. Spellfire had massive power creep issues to the point where if you weren't going to buy the newest expansions, forget it. You can't even play the game. It's just not possible, right? And with Magic the Gathering, Magic the Gathering is a unique beast in that most of the truly most powerful cards in the game exist from the beginning of the game. I was having this discussion last night at the game store, and it kind of led me down this path thinking about the power creeps and how they have crushed so many games throughout the years, but how Magic the Gathering successfully saw the threat of power creep and worked in different ways to combat it. There are a number of different tools that they have used to stop power creep from destroying the game, but also allow them to print some more powerful cards than they have in the past and stay back. In certain places, they've set the high watermark for what we will see, and they will never top that, and it's obvious. If you look at certain cards like Ancestral Recall, that card is just too strong, right? 1 blue to draw 3 cards, or make any player draw 3 cards at instant speed, is too strong. But they did do things like Ancestral Visions, cards that kind of play on the concept, but tweak the power level back to a certain degree to not exceed that insane level of power. Now, at a certain point, back in the day when we played Magic, there were no different formats. Magic was Magic. You just built your deck and played, and you had access to everything that existed. And then along came Type 1 and Type 2 and ruined everything! Or at least that's how it felt to me at the time. I have a different view now, but back then, Type 2 and Type 1 were a way of essentially that was the birth of standard and older formats. Type 2 still exists today as standard, and all the other formats like Type 1.5, Type 1, everything has different names, and Type 1 kind of spread out into a bunch of different things. But Type 2, which is the most important one in all honesty, when I thought about it and broke it down, Type 2 or standard was the most important thing to save Magic from power creep. Because what you have to think about is, why does power creep exist? Power creep exists to sell you things. That's really the genuine reason for power creep. Power creep doesn't have to exist in a game per se. It generally will, depending on how much design space there is and how much they move things around, but it doesn't have to exist. The reason it exists is because the producer of the card game wants you to buy more. I want you to buy more. How do I do that? I entice you with new cards that you want to have. How do I do that? I make cards that are better than the previous cards. That is the answer a lot of games go to, but that's the wrong answer. You can't keep making better and better cards, because if you do that, what happens is anybody who steps away from the game for any amount of time and comes back, everything they own is now useless. You're obsoleting their entire collection. Power creep obsoletes too many things. So that's where Type 2 was actually a genius move on Wizards of the Coast part. What they did was they made this a format that would only have a few years worth of stuff. Okay, this is going to be our most important format that we push to sell packs of new cards. So instead of making sure that every new set is more powerful than the last to get you, come on, buy it, come on, you want the cards, they go instead, we have a format where we are going to include X number of sets, 6 sets, 8 sets, however many sets standard is comprised of at any given moment, right? And so you have all these different cards to draw on to create a semi-diverse environment. Obviously, standard isn't going to be as diverse in terms of cards as modern, but you can see exactly where they are keeping tabs and track of power levels for standard when you look at things like the upcoming Modern Horizons set. This is a set specifically designed for modern. It's not only pulling old cards and reprinting them from older formats to get them into modern, but it's also bringing brand new cards like I showed you in my spoiler video. And if you don't know what Modern Horizons is, there's a video on this channel detailing everything that it is. It is not a standard set, and that's important to note. None of these cards will be entering standard, which is good because the power level of some of these cards would warp standard to such a degree that they would basically, their presence would be too strongly felt and they would need to be banned. So thus, they really couldn't be printed in the first place because Wizards of the Coast is not looking to print cards to ban them right away. That's a really feel-bad situation. The last thing Wizards wants to do is standard bans. They know they're going to have to do modern bans because modern is a changing beast with so many pieces that it's pretty much inevitable modern bans will be required. But a finely tuned standard environment does not require any banning. So when you look at cards like Modern Horizons, it shows that they know this. They know that standard has to be kept a particular way. You can't put too much power into it. This whole Modern Horizons set allows them to tweak modern, add some new things in, shake up the environment without messing with standard, because standard is very important for power balancing Magic. Whenever standard gets out of whack, that's when Magic's health takes a big tumble. And we have seen this at numerous points through Magic's history. There have been different points where it's like certain decks are just so dominant that you either play the dominant deck or you play the only answer to the dominant deck if it even exists. And one of the times in more recent history, I mean, granted, I'm the Magic historian, so I have a long view of this. But one of the more recent examples to me is the Ravager Affinity that cropped up during Mirrodin. They made a ton of artifacts and artifact-themed stuff for the Mirrodin block, but the problem was really things like the artifact lands, which on the surface seem fairly innocuous, but somebody pulled all the pieces together to build Ravager Affinity, and that deck was incredibly powerful. And it made for an incredibly oppressive standard environment where you either played Affinity, like Ravager Affinity specifically, or you played the Silver Bullet to Ravager Affinity. Those were your choices if you wanted to have any real chance in the tournaments. So at that point, Wizards of the Coast had to go and kind of change things around. And I believe that's when they instituted their PowerPoint system. Now, I'm not sure if they still use it, but I imagine they do because it kind of helps them out. They have a certain amount of power that they're allowed to have each set. Basically, each set is only allowed to have a certain amount of power in it. And if you want to make cards that are more powerful, you have to take power away from different areas. You're not allowed to just make a whole bunch of powerful cards. What they had to do after the Mirrodin fiasco was they actually had to make Kamigawa really weak to help kind of balance it out. Basically, it was like watering down standard. They had to water down the card pool and make it weaker. So Kamigawa was a very weak and garbage set. That's why a lot of cards from the Kamigawa block suck. I mean, which is amazing in a way, because if you look at it, Kamigawa block was the legendary matters block. So you end up with a situation where legendary cards are generally more powerful than regular versions. So you would expect that Kamigawa would actually be front-loaded with a ton of powerful stuff, big legendary beefcakes and stuff. I mean, look at Dominaria. There's more awesome uncommon legends in Dominaria than you would see in Kamigawa, because they've managed to balance things out more so that one set isn't top heavy with power, so they have to make the next set. It's like one piece of bread has way too much peanut butter on it, so you put just a little bit of peanut butter on the other slice of bread. Well, the little bit of peanut butter bread was Kamigawa. That was to balance out power issues. So going forward from that point, they've done a much better job where we haven't had too many blocks, or too many sets, I should say, where like the power level was extreme and you went, my God, look at this, is insane. So they've developed a method to keep the power creep in check. They can make cards like Healer's Hawk, where for 1 mana you get a 1/1 flyer with lifelink, which is insane by the old day standards of Magic. And so the power level of certain cards has moved up, but not in a way that overall disrupts standard to the point where it's warped, where it's like play this or this and that's it. Because you need a healthy standard environment for a healthy game of Magic. That's really what it boils down to. And keeping power creep firmly under control is one way to do that. And Wizards of the Coast has clearly illustrated that they have a reasonable handle on power creep, as it's been 25 years and they haven't flared out and reached that. Every set is just more powerful. There will be some cards in every set that make you go, whoa! But overall, they don't make sets anymore that are just, everything is crazy. They've got the power balancing under control, and that is truly what's important for the longevity of a game. I've watched way too many games just flare out and disappear specifically because they went ahead and just went, all right, we'll just keep making stronger version stuff. We'll just keep making stronger version stuff. Spellfire for my entire life will always be the most egregious example of that in my personal experience. There may be other games that are even worse for it, but I never played them because at a certain point back in the day, after getting burned by a bunch of card games that disappeared, I learned to be more reserved with my love and not run open-armed into every card game, which is why you see nowadays even I don't get into all kinds of different card games. I tend to only step into really interesting things like Keyforge or Force of Will, but the majority of card games kind of get a pass from me as I'm like, I don't trust it. I do not trust it. But I just wanted to talk about this interesting aspect of how Magic has handled power creep by specifically designing the standard environment to maintain a certain level of power that is in flux to a degree, but is constantly changing with the rotation. And then they can move into modern and other formats where Wizards doesn't have the same level of control and can just issue bannings to try and keep things more reasonable if anything gets out of whack. So for me, the system that they're using currently is actually quite effective. I'm a fan of it. They do make slip-ups and things do sometimes need to be banned in standard, but overall, we've come a long way from the days of Ravager Affinity. That being said, let's check in with the sixth color of Magic.
Together, we are the sixth color of Magic.
All right, my friends, well, I'm going to be having some fun over on my Twitch channel, so you're probably going to want to come and hang out over there as well. All that being done, time to roll the golden scroll. These are the people who support my channel through Patreon or through channel memberships. Genuinely appreciate that support. Thank you very much. And I will see you guys tomorrow.